I love my work. I love my job, but I am not just a CEO. I'm a parent. I'm a aspiring equestrian. I'm a Christian. So there's so many things that make up who I am. I'm not just this CEO. And so it would be a shame not to explore the other aspects of who I am.
Hey there, you're listening to the Priority Pursuit Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping small business owners define, maintain, and pursue both their personal and business priorities so they can build lives and businesses that they love. If you have listened to a single episode of Priority Pursuit, you know that Kelly and I do not believe work-life balance exists, at least not for most small business owners. There just aren't enough hours in the day, and as a result, we believe that there's power in defining and pursuing your priorities. Now, as small business owners, most of us are very passionate about what we do, and that makes finding work-life balance even harder. But what if you are really passionate about what you do? And I mean, what if you're really, really passionate about what you do because your small business or your nonprofits or the business you help lead makes a huge difference in people's lives? Well, that is exactly why I'm excited to have CEO and president of ICAN, which stands for Indiana Canine Assistant Network, Jillian Ashton, on the show today. Guys, I usually do a brief introduction of our guests, but ICAN is doing so many amazing things. Jillian works so ever-loving hard that I'm going to let her introduce herself, but we are specifically having Jillian on the show today because, man, she is so passionate about what she does. And when she explains what she does, you will understand why. So if this woman can find a semblance of work-life balance, I guess there is hope for the rest of us. Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the show. We're so glad to have you.
Oh, thanks, Victoria. Glad to be here and appreciate the opportunity just to share. I mean, work-life balance is tough, but the job I get to do is with puppy dogs, so there's a little bit of balance in that because we're always around animals, and I think they can bring us some joy in our workday that perhaps we don't get in other types of work environments. So I'm grateful to be here with you. Really appreciate it.
Well, I guess, we can just wrap up the episode now. Everybody needs a dog, and then work-life balance
Yeah,
will
I
be
agree.
achieved.
I definitely agree. When I first got involved with ICAN as a volunteer, because I did not have really work-life balance when I became a
Mhm.
volunteer, and I was seeking out opportunities to engage with a mission-led organization. But selfishly, I wanted to be around animals, and I wanted to be
Mhm.
somewhat involved with dogs specifically. And I had a career at that time where I traveled a lot. And so it wasn't feasible to have a pet because I didn't think it was fair to leave him or her, for days on end to do work travel. So I stumbled upon ICANN about 20 some years ago, where they were training service dogs for people living with disabilities. But the real unique thing is they are trained in prisons throughout the state of Indiana. And because they're in the prison environment, they rely heavily on volunteers to take the dogs from that prison environment and give them real life experiences on a day-to-day basis, like taking them to work or taking them to church
Mhm.
or to a ball game. And I thought, wow, this is great, right? This is an opportunity for me to get that pet fix that I was looking for, but yet not have the full time commitment of a dog or leaving them behind
Mhm.
when I was doing work travel. And so I think I started out with ICANN with very selfish intentions because it was all about getting the love and affection from a dog and have that, dog culture, but yet not have the full responsibility of taking it on. And I quickly learned that this mission that ICANN has is really it's very intoxicating. It is something that
Mhm.
when you learn about all the different facets of what we're trying to do, it's hard not to fall in love with what we're doing. And that's what I did. And
Mhm.
became a volunteer, became a board member, and then eventually 10 years ago was hired to become their executive, leading the organization, which I felt like at that point I reached my apex of my career, because I was just so grateful to be involved with an organization that I love and a mission that I love, and then also, help other people fall in love with the mission as well. So it's been great. It's been a great journey.
We and at Tree Frog, we just love that. Guys, ICAN has been a Tree Frog client and man, talk about, a fun project to work on, websites with dogs. Like it really like literally does not get better than that. So Jillian, thank you so much for sharing a bit of your story about I mean, I know like I say a bit of your story, like it just because you have been part of this organization now for such a long time in one capacity or another. But if somebody were it came up to you like on the street and asked, what is ICAN? How did it come to be?
Yeah, so the history of ICAN, we started back in 2001 with 3 dogs in the program, and always the goal of the organization was to provide opportunities on both sides of the leash. So, on the one side, really looking at incarcerated individuals to do the training of those dogs. And it takes about 2 years to prepare a dog for their service. And so that's a long time that an individual is connected to that animal, giving them all the skills that they would need. I mean, once they graduate, those dogs know anywhere between 60 to 70 cues that they will help their client with. So teaching all of those aspects of those cues is critical. And so having that inmate not only perform that, but then they have to work in a group environment. Usually we have about 20 to 25 dogs in one prison, and they all live together, they work together, they socialize together. So you're talking about a small microcosm of people living and doing this job in one small space. And I don't know about you, Victoria, but I love my coworkers, but if I had to live with them and work with them and do all that every day, I think at some point I might need to, like, separate, right? And in prison you don't really have that luxury of, getting in your car and going for a drive. So these folks have to not only learn the skills to teach the dogs to be successful, but they also need to learn interpersonal skills and team building concepts. And they also need to learn how to resolve conflict, because maybe one person has a different thought about how to train the dog in this specific skill. And they need to learn how to work through those conflicts and have those dialogues that probably in most cases prior to coming into prison they did not learn those skills. So I'm really
Mhm.
proud of the work that we do on that side of the leash, because it's not only getting the end result, the dog trained, but it's teaching those individuals how to navigate their world and contribute to the world right from where they are. And there's some great success stories of those individuals. If they do get out of prison, we have a large group of individuals that will go into some type of animal related uh, profession, whether it's like dog grooming, maybe dog training. We have even some become vet techs. So we know the animals are transcending a part of their woundedness, and maybe part of where they failed before, and now they're excelling
Mhm.
because they have learned through the eyes of a dog how to like do all these things, right? So very proud
Mhm.
of that. And then after that 2 year training process, the dogs then are placed with an individual living with a disability. And again, it transforms that individual, giving them a opportunity to navigate the world maybe more confidently, especially when we
Mhm.
place with kiddos. It really acts as a bridge to other children who may not be in a wheelchair, and to make it less intimidating maybe for somebody else to approach them. They want us to come and say hello to the dog, so there is this opportunity to kind of have conversation and community, and break down barriers. And I love that piece of the program as well. And it just, again, it shows how dogs can really transform people's lives in so many ways. I mean, most of us as pet owners already know that, but then working
Mhm.
dogs have this little extra skill set that really can be used every day as people need it to navigate the world.
Guys, like I said, when we started this episode, Jillian had to do her own introduction because, man, they have so many things going on. They're helping so many people through their services. And, Jillian, it just makes sense that exactly why you're so passionate about what you do. I mean, how could you not be? But well, before we do dive into more conversations about work-life balance, we are on the Priority Pursuit podcast, which means we need to start our episode by talking about our priorities, just so all of our listeners have a frame of reference of where you are coming from. So, Jillian, if you don't mind me asking, what are your personal priorities and what kinds of boundaries do you set to protect them?
Yeah, I appreciate having some time to think through this before our conversation. But I think for me, it really comes down to faith, family, and fitness. I wanted to keep that alliteration of F's in there. So
Oh, I appreciate
so
it.
faith, family, and fitness. And of course, I think faith for me is the tether to everything else. It just,
Mhm,
um, even when I look at our program and the people that have evolved out of maybe where they have been, it's through some type of line of faith. Maybe it's
mhm,
faith in their ability or faith in a higher power, but certainly to think beyond ourselves and to know
mhm,
that there's something bigger out there than just me, right? We are in probably a society today where we're all about the iPad and the iPhone, and all
mhm,
of it is somewhat narcissistic centered. And so the more that we can break out of that and actually realize that there's something bigger than ourselves, and so I really, that is a huge tether for me, is my faith. Family, obviously, because who else can, dogs are really loyal. I think family is
mhm.
next, right? I would say family is probably behind dogs, but when you go home at night and is there a relationship there that of a partner or a friend or a child that you have good conversation with, that you have a good
Mm,
relationship with? Because at the end of the day, it's all about our family and making choices that focus on family. Whenever you're set up with a decision of, do I do this or do I do this? I always put my faith in my family kind of in that equation before I make a decision, especially a big life, change decision. And then fitness for me, it's just, while I do work with dogs and we have a great mission and there's lots of good things happening within the organization, there's a lot of pressure too. There's fundraising, making sure that we're meeting the needs of our clients on a daily basis. We work with people too, and dogs, so we work with people, and there's always um, different maybe set of opinions or thought perspectives, and I want to be the best leader that I can for my team. And so fitness for me helps me get focused and helps me stay kind of central to my health. And it's not just running a marathon or doing it's some major cardio thing, but it could also mean meditation and maybe putting myself in a situation where I am quiet and still. And so that kind of relates back to my faith, where maybe I can hear the word of God through my quietness and my stillness to try to guide me through maybe a situation that I'm trying to navigate, if it's work related or family related. So those are the three main tethers, I think, for my life that, I want to adhere to, and again, they're the kind of the catalyst for any decision that I make. I try to focus it on those three things, and especially using the fitness as a way to I don't know, um, have the time, right? Making the time and the commitment. And I actually have it scheduled on my calendar. And I feel like if I make an appointment, like I make an appointment with you, Victoria, to do this podcast, I'm going to commit myself to do it. I'm going to show up. I'm going to be there and be prepared. We so often will cancel fitness to do something else. And I try really hard not to, because I'm like, that's a commitment that I made to myself, just like I made a commitment to you. And I'm just as important as my colleague or my client or, my dentist, right? So,
yes.
so just trying to ensure that all those pieces kind of come into play, so that it gives you a strong foundation.
I love that. And I mean, also, I think that your answers are just so reflective as to why you are so wonderful at what you do and how passionate you are about what you do. Because pretty much all the responses you gave, it's like, like this is a personal priority because it also helps ICAN. So, yes, it's a beautiful, beautiful blend. And then, Jillian, we also want to ask about your business priorities.
Yeah.
So, what are your top three business priorities? So, in other words, kind of like what moves the needle for ICAN most, and what boundaries do you set to protect those?
Yeah. So, where we are as an organization, like I mentioned, we're about a 20-year-old organization. So we've gone through a couple life cycles, and where we are right now is on a path of growth. And with that growth comes responsibility to the quality of the dog that we're putting out and ensuring that that dog meets all the metrics that we believe makes for a successful service dog. And then in addition to that, financially, it costs us about $25,000 to train one service dog for an individual. And we do not pass that cost along to the person. So on our mobility side, we only charge 10% of that. And then on our veteran side, we have no charge at all. So that's a big gap. And anyone listening, if they're looking at a business model and if you create a product for $25,000 and you're only getting back on average $2,500, there's a big gap. And so as we grow, making sure that the financial gap is filled so that we can keep those costs really low is really important. And then there's also, strategically staying the course. So for us, another area that we're really focused on is our staffing model. As we talked a little bit about, like we created this leadership team, so that way we can diversify how each part of the organization is operating, and that leadership team has their own personal goals that roll up to the bigger organizational goals. And one of the key things that we're really driving toward is, on average, it takes about 28 months, so a little over 2.5 years, for someone to be placed with a service dog. So once you identify,
Mhm.
like, hey, I would like to get a dog, we walk through what you envision the dog to do for you on a daily basis, and we kind of get you in that application process finalized. You become an applicant for us, and you wait then, this 2.5 year period of time.
Mhm.
And we believe that that's way too long. If you have a solution right in front of you, but you can't quite grasp it, and you have to wait 28 months to be able to use it, we feel like that's just too long. So our goal is to move the needle back to 12 months. And so everything that we are constantly doing on a daily basis, whether it's fundraising, whether it's dog
Mhm.
training, whether it's staffing, is to get to that goal of moving the needle to 12 months at maximum placement time. That way we can serve more people, we can serve them more readily, and change the world, right? Which is
Yes.
all the things that we want to do as an individual, just bring hope to other people.
Love that. Well, Jillian, we also have to talk about, well, before we can really talk about what work life balance looks like for you and how we can try to semi achieve it at least, we have to talk about, what day to day life and business looks like for you. I'm sure a lot of people listening right now are thinking, like, oh, she just gets to train dogs all day. Like, this is the best. This is the best job. So give us an overview of what day to day, not just business looks like for you, but also life, so we can get in that frame of reference.
Yeah. Well, and I will tell you, Victoria, my team never wants me to train a dog. So I will tell you that right off the get go. I'm really good with puppies. Like I can do the puppy work, but then once they kind of get um, skilled, I'm probably not the best dog trainer. And I think that's really critical for most business owners. When you are an entrepreneur or when you have a passion for what you're doing, that's fabulous, right? But I think the critical part is surrounding yourself with people who have specific skill sets to fill your gaps. So clearly, I am not a dog trainer. I'm an operational. My brain goes operational. My brain kind of focuses on strategy. I have other people that do the training. We have other people that work on the philanthropy. So that way, we have a nice kaleidoscope of individuals working on the mission, and the mission is always in the center. But I think that's a really key part of work-life balance, to surround yourself with people who can do the job. So I, I can share a little story. A couple years ago, my husband's Australian, and so we decided to go on vacation and go visit family back in Australia. Well, you can't just go for a long weekend, right? Like, the flight is 17 hours, and there's a long time that you have to get there and get back. So I think we were gone for 14 days or 15 days or something like that. It was the longest time that I had been away from the organization on a day-to-day basis. Plus, you have this different time zone issue where when you're waking up, everyone here is going to bed, and you're having this big delay of time and all that. So I think during that period of time, from the whole time that we were gone, all I had to do is approve payroll, and the rest of it kind of fell in very smoothly. And that was the first time in my career that I had that opportunity to step away from my job, my day-to-day job, and felt 100% confident that whatever was happening back at the shop, if you will, was happening. People were moving things forward. And when I came back, the backlog wasn't quite there, that I had, that I used to have. The emails weren't as many, and it clicked for me. I'm like, this is the first time that I've had a team that is very clear on their roles, their responsibilities. We know who's accountable to things. And it just felt really good. And I thought, okay, this is something that we need to take as a baseline, and then expand from here, because I want everyone in our organization to have that experience, to go on vacation, to be able to walk away from that day-to-day work, rejuvenate, and then come back and not have to feel like they have to be on call 24/7. And so it was a really key learning for me. And I think that's important. So part of my day-to-day job is to ensure that the leadership that we have within the organization is poised and ready to go for those types of situations, whether it's a vacation, whether it's an illness that pops up that is going to take you out of the work environment for an extended period of time. And this is really hard for me because I'm a doer, and I I really want to be in the day to day. I want to help be solution oriented. And the more that I step back and ask questions, even if I know the answer, I may ask the question and have somebody else try to think through it. It's changed our organization. It's really impacted the people, and hopefully people love their job even more, right? Because they get to impart and be allow their thoughts and processes to be implemented, as opposed to, well, Jillian said, so this is what we're going to do, right? So a large portion of my day is spent on strategy and working with folks, and just trying to prepare them, and working through those leadership moments. But I always start my day, personally, I always start my day with a half hour of quiet reading, or just quiet focus, again going back to that fitness piece of just sitting and listening and trying to prepare for my day, from a spiritual standpoint. And I usually try to eke in at least 30 to 40 minutes of an elliptical, or something like that. And that's usually where I put my guilty pleasure. I'll watch like the Emily in Paris or something silly, a silly show,
That's not guilty. It's just cute.
just some silly show or whatever while I'm on the elliptical, just to kind of take my mind off of maybe the day ahead and maybe the stress, and not get too amped up about it. And then once I get into the office, it's a matter of, again, focusing on my team members, making sure, I'm a real big fan of management by walking around. And so walking around the office, just checking in with folks, seeing how they're doing, I often ask questions like, how's your day, or how's your day going? But then, is there anything that I can help you with today? Or is there something that, that you would need my support on? And usually that pulls a thing like, oh yeah, I wanted to get your opinion on this. But I usually don't have to get pulled into the minuscule type things, which is really good. And then from there, depending on the day, I am meeting with donors and trying to share our mission with individuals so that they can be excited about the mission as much as I am, and be able to share that vision, and hopefully have them get involved or engaged in some way. And then I do try to leave the office no later than 6 o'clock or so that I can get maybe to my next thing. I also have another pet, a horse that I recently purchased, and that has taught me a lot about leadership. So I love to go out to the barn and just spend some time with her. And with a 1,000-pound animal, you got to be really clear and consistent with your communication. And I'm learning how to do that. And she's my partner and not my, I can't just tell her what to do, because she's a really big animal, and you got to have a partnership there. So I usually spend some time with her and decompress from the day, and then home, and just kind of get home and kind of settle in for the evening with my husband. And we have 3 adult children, so we have the luxury of being able to kind of be empty nesters at this point in our lives, which is great. So we just kind of close the day out with spending time with him. And then I also go to bed fairly early. I'm probably not the most ideal. I wake up at 5 and I go to bed at 9:30. So I think sleep is really critical. I've known this all my life, even like in college. I think I pulled one all-nighter, and it was the most miserable experience of my life. The next day was horrible, and then the next 3 days after that were as horrible, because I just, my sleep pattern was off. So I decided right then and there that I would never pull an all-nighter again, unless if it was for something really fun. But I just decided at that point that sleep is really important. And so I ensure that I, get at least 7 hours of sleep a night, because it really helps me stay functional. And so that's kind of my day, where you just kind of focus on the mission and family and a little bit of leadership. So.
Many small businesses don't have an effective marketing strategy, and because of this, they try one tactic after another without seeing results. This not only prevents consistent business growth, it makes managing marketing efforts more difficult than it should be. As a marketing agency for small businesses, we understand how frustrating it can be when hard work doesn't deliver the results that you want. Because of this, TreeFrog has developed a proven 4-step marketing system that will help any small business grow. On our website, you can also schedule a 30-minute discovery call to discuss working with TreeFrog to build a marketing strategy that will allow your small business to finally see the growth you've been working so hard to achieve.
Photographers, would you love to spend less time behind your computer and more time shooting with your loved ones, or doing literally anything else than editing? If so, it's time to outsource your editing. Now, I know what you're going to say. I can't outsource my editing. An editor won't be able to match my style. But friend, I'm here to tell you that you're wrong. I've been working with Photographers Edit for years, and their team of experienced editors match my editing style perfectly, because 1, they took the time to get familiar with my preferences and brand. 2, they look at the sample edits I include in each Lightroom catalog. And 3, they allow me to submit feedback after every project, so the next time we work together, things are even better. Outsourcing my editing to Photographers Edit has drastically streamlined my workflow. I mean, after I shoot a wedding or a session, I simply cull the images and mark the photos I want to blog using Aftershoot. Then I create a Lightroom catalog, only edit the photos I plan to blog and share on social media. I add a green label to the photos I edit, share the catalog with Photographers Edit, and they use the photos I mark in green as samples to finish editing the remaining images. From there, Photographers Edit sends the catalog back to me within a few days. I review the images, export them, and share my clients' galleries with them. Outsourcing my editing has given me the freedom to spend more time with Zach and Hattie, go to bed at a reasonable time, better serve my clients, and work on projects I'm excited about, like this podcast. Right now, editing is likely taking up most of your time, but I can tell you from experience experience doesn't have to. To receive 50% off your first order from Photographer's Edit, go to treefrogmarketing.com/PE or simply use code VRayburn at checkout. Again, that's treefrogmarketing.com/PE or use code VRayburn at checkout. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for breaking all of that down for us. I am making a list of questions here because I think a lot of people are. I'm going to ask you one more before we maybe
Yeah.
backtrack to some of these other conversations. But I think a lot of people are listening right now as small business owners and small business leaders and thinking holy cow, I wish that is what my schedule looked like. I wish I had time to check in on my team and see what they need, but not get lost in the weeds. And I wish, I was actually leaving the office at 6 o'clock.
Yeah.
But I have a feeling that has not always been the case for you. So we're going to dive into all of that. But I guess before we do that, I want to ask Jillian, so a lot of small business owners they're passionate about what they do, but they think but I think anybody who knows you would agree that you are particularly passionate about the services that ICAN offers. So kind of with this in mind, how do you achieve even a semblance of work-life balance? Because I know for you as somebody who is so passionate about what you do, it's got to be hard at moments to just shut the work side of your brain off, to go and ride your horse, to spend time, with your husband or with your kids when you because you're clearly so passionate about what you do. So yeah, break that down for us. And then I guess I would also be curious to know with, you being involved with ICANN for 20 years. And you said, this was recently you went on vacation. It was the first time you ever got to come back and didn't feel entirely overwhelmed. So I'm throwing a lot of questions at you at once, but basically, if small business owners are listening and they're like, holy cow, I don't know how to get my schedule to look like that. I don't know how to be just at peace in this season of life. What practical advice do you have for them?
Yeah. And I think you have to, at least from my perspective, you have to decide what's most important. And then decisions fall all from that. So like I mentioned, faith, family, and fitness. So, um, and I'll tell you, there's sometimes even in my own household, my husband has a very busy job. He typically goes to the office about 6:15 in the morning. So we both are early risers. So that might be the first key. Marry somebody that has the same sleep schedule as you. That might be one very practical way for all the single folks listening. Just make sure your partner is on the same sleep schedule. But he goes in at 6:15, and he usually gets home about 6:30 on average. There's those outlier days where you might have to work later or shorter. And there's moments where he's like, gosh, your schedule's so flexible, you're able to kind of do these things, and spend time. And I agree to him to some extent. Being in the organization for 20 years, I feel like I've gained the respect of our board, my staff. So I know that they know I'm going to show up for them when they need it. And so and I think that's critical, having um, that confidence between each other, right? Relationally, that I'm going to be there when you need me, and show up, and check it off the list, and make sure you're there. But I so I agree with that. I do have some flexibility, but I also create the system internally. So like I said, I actually put these things on my calendar. I schedule the half hour of reading in the morning. I schedule the hour in 45 minutes of exercise or whatnot. And so philosophically, I've just got to a point, because you're right. There was a moment in my life that it was all over the place. I wasn't very disciplined about what I was doing, and I was miserable because I was like, oh my gosh, I'm here until 7:30. I still haven't gotten my to-do list done, and I'm just really frustrated. So I finally made the commitment to myself to say, if I'm going to be successful, I'm going to have to put some type of boundaries around things. So I put these things on my schedule. I have them scheduled out. Do I hit them 100% of the time? Not always, but just the attempt of doing it and being committed to it 90% of the time makes me feel like, okay, I'm achieving, something. The other thing that I do very, tactily, because running an organization, you do touch so many different things, operations, donors. Some days I have to work on strategy. And so I've even tried to schedule my days that naturally flow, where Monday I focus on strategy and my leadership team. We have our leadership team meeting every Monday morning, bright and early, and then I focus on strategy for the rest of the day. And so if I have any meetings, if I'm making any appointments with anyone that's about strategy, I try to do it on a Monday. And then Tuesdays are kind of my operations days. So that's usually when I'm processing payroll or getting, because I run the HR side of our business. So I'm working through any type of HR issues, learning about HR or, whatever. So I try to put things in compartments on each day. And then I use Friday as kind of a cleanup day. So that's my day where I then look to the next week and plan it. When I started becoming more disciplined in doing that, and actually not just like writing it down and then saying, oh yeah, this is a nice idea and concept. But when I actually started to like say, no, I can't take that meeting on that day because I'm going to push it to Wednesday, which is my donor day. I became just a lot more organized in my thought process, because once you start thinking about financials or HR or something, and then you interrupt yourself with something strategic, or you interrupt yourself with something like, I even go out sometimes and clean up the dog yard, right? We have a dog run, and
Mm-hmm.
sometimes that just needs cleaned up because I need a project that has a beginning and an end. Um,
Yeah.
those interruptions sometimes can derail you for 3 hours. And so I just, and I, going back into my career, I even owned a small business, a marble and granite company at one point. So there was a lot of operations there where you had to keep your production schedule going because you promised something to a client by a certain day. And especially if we were in a new build or something like that, if we didn't produce the product at the day that we said we were going to, it can interrupt then other vendors like electricians or flooring guys or whatever. So it was really critical for us to stay on target so that other people's lives weren't interrupted because of our failure to do what we said we were going to do at the day that we were going to do it. So I think that's where I really learned, because it was such um, an environment where there was these very strong deadlines. That's when I started kind of working through and saying, okay, how can I get the job done, not go crazy? I'm a business owner, so I have to do all these other things, payroll and things like that. But then at the end of the day, make the customer happy. And that's just it's not easy. And I think once you figure out like it's never going to be 100%, but let's just try somewhere, right? And maybe you start out hitting it 40% of the time, and then you move it up to 50 or whatever. And I think just incrementally doing some very tangible things, and scheduling is probably my key. It has helped me immensely be able to just protect time. And I realized like whenever we had our children, so we have triplets,
Oh,
and
wow.
so
So not just 3 kids,
right.
triplets.
They were all doing the same thing at the same time, but none of them could like the same thing. Like I had one in band, I had one that was an athlete, and then the other one was all over the place, always seeking what he wanted, what was his kind of niche or whatever. So it wasn't like they were all in band and I could drop them off at one time in one location. It was all this. And so just thinking through that period of time in our lives, like I had no control over my schedule at that point. It was really dictated by children's schedules and all that. So I say that just because I do recognize that there's different stages and phases of your life that you may be more successful at things because of just where you are. But I think the most important thing, Victoria, is just love where you are, because every moment, it doesn't last forever. And even days that I'm really super super organized and kind of working my day and I feel really good, well, the next week could fall all apart because I got sick, or a staff member was out of the office, and so it changed the cadence. Or I had so many meetings on my calendar that I could never really catch up to check on email or do. So there, so I think you just have to live with an ounce of grace, where you can give yourself that grace to say, okay, today wasn't the most ideal day. What's one thing that I would do differently tomorrow that I feel like could set me on a path to success? And 99.9% of the time, for me, that is that quiet time first thing in the morning. And then at the end of the day, just looking at my schedule and writing out like anything that I have to be aware of for the next day. So just those bookends on either end of the day, or beginning or end of the day, that those things, those are my to go to. I go back to those to just say, okay, today was a today was a circus. There were lots of monkeys. I couldn't really deal with a lot. I couldn't control a lot, but tomorrow I'm going to try to at least do these two things. And that usually, starts putting things back on track. So.
Mhm. Oh, man, so many good things in there, so much wisdom in all of those answers. Jillian, I do wonder, I know you said that you try to leave the office by 6 o'clock every night. I think so much of what you discussed, like a lot of times, I think small business owners, they hear that kind of advice. They're like, yes, I'm ready for this. I'm going to block my time and do all these other things. But then, like when it comes to the time to stop working at the end of the day, that's where it starts to get a little loose. Like maybe they leave the office, but they go home and they keep working. Or maybe they work from home and they take a lap around the house and then all of a sudden they're back at their desk. Do you have any advice in terms of like just shutting down for the day, or any processes like you found that work? And I mean, and out of curiosity, I mean, well, you said that, you used to not leave at 6 o'clock. So yes, tell us how you ended up, actually having a hard cutoff, and, what your work life looks like when you go home after you've left the office.
Yeah. That's a tough one, because again, I think it's an individual, like going back to what is your priority, and what specifically are you going to commit to do. But for me, it was just making, I think half the battle is just making the decision, or
Yeah.
maybe it's even more than half. It may be the whole thing is just making the decision that you're going to do something different, and you want something different for your life. Because I have a milestone birthday coming up in a few weeks, so I'll be turning 50. And
Oh,
when I
happy early birthday.
thank you. So when I think about even my, from 20s to 50, so my working career piece or whatever, and all the time that I wasted, or all the time that I could have been doing something different than what I was doing. And again, that ounce of grace has to come into play, where you're saying, okay, well, I can't change the past, but when you look at, I just recently did this exercise, so knowing I'm going to be hitting this 50 milestone, somebody encouraged me to say, I was asking him, like, what big things should I be doing? Like, what things should I be focused on? He goes, well, I think you start with 60 and look at 60 and write down, what do you want your life to look like at 60? And I was like, oh, okay. So we walked through that, and I kind of gave a couple things about what I wanted my life to look like at 60. And, did I want to be retired or working on retirement, and what I want my relationship with my children to be, and all those things. So looked at all that and kind of wrote those down. And he goes, so look at that and start making decisions today about how to get there. And I thought, wow, that was such a very easy but very powerful exercise. And maybe 10 years is too long, but even just say 5 years from now at this age, what do I hope to be doing? And I can, for me, I love my job. I love my work. I love serving people. I want people to experience the benefits of having a service dog. But if I were to fast forward and say, okay, what do I want my life to be like 60? Nowhere in that plan did I say, oh, I want to work more, or I want to I want to, be sitting at my desk until 8 o'clock at night trying to figure out a solution or to a problem or whatever, that never came into the preview, right? So I'm just trying to encourage people to say, okay, where do you want your life to go? And this is what organizations do all the time. We say, what growth do we want to have in 5 years? Where do we want to be in 10 years? Like, what's the 3 year plan? And then we work toward that plan. But so often we don't do that for our own lives. And we don't really focus on what it really truly takes to get there. It's like, hey, I feel like from a fitness standpoint, like I love to just be really mobile and healthy at 60. Well, hope is not a strategy. So what am I going to do in order to get to that point and make sure that I'm as healthy as I possibly can at that stage? And I think about my kids. They're 23 years old and they're becoming young adults. And so when they're 33, what kind of relationship do I want with them? And right now we have a relationship with one of our children. It's somewhat strained and it's not easy. It's a really complicated relationship. And so that was one that I put down. Like, I want to have a loving relationship with this child. And so what am I going to do today to get it there? And then that takes the pressure off that it doesn't have to happen in a year. It doesn't have to happen in the next 3 months, but it's something that you can work toward, just like a strategic plan for your business. Create a strategic plan for your life and work toward that. So going back to your original question, like, what at the end of the day, when you're going home or making that commitment, it's simply just the decision that I've made for my own life, where I am in my life, to say, this is what I'm going to commit to doing. And if I'm going to spend the rest of my life with my husband too, I want to know him and like him in 10 years, right? I want to understand what his hopes and dreams are, so that maybe I can be supportive in some way for those efforts too. And then I'm not just always focused on myself, because that's where I think we get in trouble when we, again, going back to the iPad and the iPhone and if we're just focused on ourselves, then we're not in community with anyone else. And I think we're commissioned to be in community with people. Now, I might only select 5 people to be in community with and a dog, um, but I don't need to be in community with thousands and thousands of people. But
Mhm.
if it's those 5 people, they're the most important people in my life. And I want to have successful relationships with them in 10 years. So I've got to make the decision today to make that effort and to put that forth. So I think it's just a matter of making a commitment to yourself and adhering to it. I mean,
Mhm.
simple as a
Amen
decision.
to all of that.
Yeah.
So, Jillian, I guess my follow-up question to that would be, because I know a lot of small business owners are probably thinking like, well, that sounds great. Yes, I could like make that decision, but then like what happens to all of the other work? So, I guess kind of two questions as a result of all the wonderful things that you just said in this situation. Kind of like, what comes first, like the chicken or the egg? Like, do you just decide this is what I'm doing and then you figure out the work stuff and you figure out how get all the tasks done? Or is it you need to grind and grind and grind and eventually you earn this right to make your
Ooh,
calendar how you want it?
yeah, that's a great question. Wow. I hope it's not that you have to grind and grind and grind, because I think that wears us out pretty quickly, and then we're not our best selves for, other people. Um, I think there's probably two things. And for me, again, as I've shared, I'm a faith-based person. I really do try to look to teachings in the Bible or whatever to kind of guide what I'm doing. And I think there's two things. There is such beauty in surrender. And when you kind of just decide that I can't do all of it, I simply cannot do all of it, and I'm going to need help. And as I mentioned before, like, giving my the leadership team responsibilities and allowing them to make the decision, that's not easy for me, because I do have very strong opinions about how things should be done and when they should be done, and all the things, right? But the more that I surrender to the fact that I've got good people around me, the more I surrender to, I need to seek out help. And that help might come from biblical teaching, or it may come from other colleagues or people that are in the same space as ourselves, or maybe a colleague that has experienced something similar to maybe the problem I'm trying to solve, and actually be vulnerable enough to say, I've not done this before. Last year, we acquired another not-for-profit that was in northern Indiana, and, I never acquired a business before. So I had to ask for help. And I would never do that without having that help, either legal advice or, whatnot. So there's certain things that are just way out of our scope, and learn as much as you can and surround yourself with good people. But I think there's great strength in the surrender and trying to have others come into the scenario to help you with that too. The other part that I think really helps people get to this point is clarity, and just really being clear on where is it that you want to go, how do you want to get there, and then just sticking to that, because then that gives you margin to address the things that you can't control, right? The busted pipe in the warehouse that just, damaged thousands of dollars worth of inventory or whatever. It gives you margin to deal with those things because you're not filling your time or your brain with all these other things. And that clarity could be, this is my week plan, this is my quarter plan, this is my year plan, whatever that you just have to be really clear on, that these are the things I'm going to do this quarter to move my business down the path. I think clarity, and for your team, once you get really clear, everyone's on the same page and all the oars are in the water, moving in the same direction. And probably a tool that really helped our business kind of begin this process is a book called Traction, and it's the entrepreneur operating system. And it does kind of walk you through, like, how do you get really clear on what your goals and objectives are, and then how do you communicate that throughout the organization, whether you have 12 people or whether you have 200 or 2,000. There is methodology there in communicating that vision across all of those folks, so then they know exactly where you're going. And so then you can, with that clarity, get there and everyone is moving in that same direction, and you're not feeling like you're pushing, the proverbial snowball up the hill, right? You actually got momentum, and everyone's working in the same direction. So I just think that those two really changed the way, the going from working 11, 12, 13 hours a day to being able to
Mhm.
have margin was, surrendering and figuring out how I could do this better with more people around me, or people that had expertise outside of what I
Mhm.
have, and then just getting really clear on the direction we're going. And it's amazing, like, once you kind of get to that point, the grind the grind becomes very fluid, and it's fun. And I mean, again, there's days where you're just like, okay, I'm totally not the right person for this job, right? You walk away going, okay, that day pretty much, I'll chalk that up as a bad one. But most times I feel like, I walk away going, okay, I at least did one thing today that was going to move the needle on the business, and I didn't go crazy doing it, right? And then lastly, I think hairdressers are really important to covering the gray. And so whatever gray you got going on or whatever, I think having a great hairstylist will help you figure all that out, where you can just kind of say, okay, well, I don't look as frazzled as I feel, and they can help address those issues. So
Oh, perfect. Well, Jillian, I guess before we officially wrap up your episode, I just have to ask, do
yeah.
you believe work-life balance exists? Why or why not?
Well, this might be a chicken and egg question as well, right?
Mhm.
Like, I think that the statement, I don't work to live, but I live to work, or you have to kind of decide what side of the coin you are on that. But I I'm an optimist. And so I would say I do believe that balance can be struck. There are going to be days and seasons where it's not going to be there. You know, when you're managing an acquisition, or you might have some staffing constraints that are really causing everyone to kind of get involved, and more so than what you have in the past. So you're going to have those seasons, but I think overall, I think it has to happen, because if you don't, I think you come to the end of your work career or your life, or whatever. You come to the end of that, and if you have regret about the previous, then there's not peace, right? And so I think at some point people do have to find what that peace is. And for some people, working is peace. For me, I love my work, I love my job, but I am not just a CEO. I'm a parent, I'm a aspiring equestrian, I'm a Christian. So there's so many things that make up who I am. I'm not just this CEO. And so it would be a shame not to explore the other aspects of who I am, because then I feel like you get left out of knowing truly who you are as an individual and what's important to you. And I just don't want to come to the end of my path, whether it's my work career or my life, and just have regret that I didn't get to know myself holistically. So I do believe work-life balance exists. You just have to choose it.
Oh, man, Jillian, this episode has just been packed with so much wisdom. I cannot wait for small business owners to hear all of it. And Jillian, if people want to find you, connect with you, learn more about ICAN and volunteering with ICAN and donating to ICAN, where can they find you? Where can they find ICAN? Tell us all the places, and we will be sure to include those in the show notes.
Well, I appreciate that. Me personally, I'm found on LinkedIn at Jillian Ashton, and here in Indianapolis, that's where our office is based out of the Zionsville area.
Mhm.
And then from a work standpoint, you can find ICAN and learn more about its mission at icandog.org. So ICANDOG.org. And then social handles are ICANDog on Facebook as well as Instagram. And we also have a page on LinkedIn to really focus on how businesses kind of impact our mission, because we do have lots of partnerships where people might sponsor. I mentioned before, that dog's $25,000. We'll have people
Mhm.
sponsor that dog, and we kind of I say we NASCAR the dogs, so they have their vest with the logo of that corporation. And there's some great ways to get corporations involved in what we're doing as well. So we have the Indiana Canine Assistant Network page on LinkedIn as well. So learn more about us there, and hopefully we'll see you at an event sometime in the near future.
Oh, absolutely. Jillian, thank you so much for coming on the
Thank
show.
you, Victoria.
This has been a great conversation.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity, and good luck in pursuing that work-life balance.
Oh, yeah, I think we all need it.